right, review video part dos. Good news, kids. JoJo, her birthday is the same day as your AP Psychology exam. If that isn't coincidence of just absolute positivity, I don't know what is. So go get yourself a Tesla like JoJo, put your face all over it, and then take the AP Psych exam. All right. This video is going to be a little bit longer. I am going to not necessarily go into as much detail about everything up here. Rather, it is sort of an all-encompassing list of things to make sure that you review as far as that second FRQ, the one that's actually worth more points. And please do keep in mind, when you get that random scenario, whatever it is, and you get those 7 concepts, or however how many they give you, to apply, that you take a few minutes, you look up the ones you don't know, you strategize, you outline whatever the case might be, and then you begin to write. And by all means, make sure you apply the concept to the scenario. So when I say take 5 minutes to get ready, read the question carefully so you understand the scenario, okay? I would hate to see concepts that you know you absolutely understand, but then you don't take the time to read the question and you don't apply it, or you don't apply it correctly. So please read that question, strategize how those concepts are going to fit into, in other words, how are you going to apply those? Because you are not going to score simply by defining. It'd be nice if you have the time to define and apply, keep in mind, but you don't need to. And I think most of the FRQs you've been utilizing or doing and completing and looking up on the College Board obviously don't tend to define and apply. But it's a strategy you could use, especially if you like to define and apply. But make sure you apply it to the scenario. Don't apply it vaguely, don't apply it generically, apply it specifically to the scenario, okay? With that in mind, let us begin. Oh, the hand mnemonic. Very exciting. Quick review of our major approaches in psychology. We'll start with our thumb. The thumb, of course, is representative of the psychodynamic approach because we're looking back over our shoulder. Looking back to our youth, to when we were so young, we probably don't have very many memories, and those memories we have are way down in our unconscious. And Freud and all the psychodynamic peeps like to focus on the unconscious and those unresolved issues deep down in your unconscious and the need to fix those, if you will, in order to improve your overall mental health. Index finger is our cognitive approach to psychology. It is all things thinking. Everything you see up here in the green arguably falls into the cognitive approach, things like memory, language, intelligence as well. All about how we think, why we think, the way we think. I'm not going to do it on video, but if I pop that middle finger up at you, you might recall that's representative of the behavioral approach to psychology, because ultimately we were taught by somebody at some point in time what the middle finger means. For some of you, it's horrific, it's terrible, you would never do that. For some of you, it's meaningless. And of course, we talked about how in other cultures and countries, the middle finger means nothing as well, where they have their own symbols, if you will. So it's a learned behavior, ultimately. And that's going to be our conditioning area that you see over here. Of course, we have our ring fingers, which very few of us can hold up straight, but we of course know we all have potential. Everybody has potential. That's the humanistic approach, talking about how all of us are good, all of us have potential, and it's all about helping people reach their potential to the best of their ability. Pinky, of course, is pinky and the brain, biological approach. Neurons, and of course the brain itself, and many other ideas up there with the eye, the ear, etc. We then, of course, have the possibility of growing an extra thumb, and that is going to be the evolutionary approach to psychology, just like science in many ways looks at evolution as something that is real and always going on and changing, we have to look at the fact that perhaps our brains and that psychology in general is fluid as well and is changing over time. And finally, we have our POM, which is the socio-cultural approach to psychology, kind of all over the place, if you will, here. Socio talking about the society you've grown up in, so urban, big city versus farm or rural. It could be things like money, economics, okay? Poor versus rich is going to impact the way you grow up and your psychology of things. And then we have the cultural approach as well. Many of you have defined cultures that you are very passionate about. That might include belief systems, religions, etc. that help you become who you are. And many of you could be a mutt without a religion, and ultimately that impacts the way you are as well. So, 7 approaches, there you go. Biology, starting with the neuron. It's supposed to be a picture of a neuron there, for those of you who can see it. Ultimately, we have the dendrites. Dendrites receive neurotransmitters from neighboring neurons. Why are we looking at neurons? Because it's how the body communicates. Every single message, it could be a motor neuron. I'm doing things with my hands. It's motor neurons telling me that's what I need to do. Okay? It could be neurotransmitters that impact your emotions. Okay, they're all over the place. So keep that in mind. Neurons and neurotransmitters is all about the way we allow our body to communicate with itself. So, whatever that neurotransmitter is taken in by the dendrites. And then, of course, it's going to be taken into the soma, or aka the cell body. And then, eventually, it's going to go out the axon, this direction. And then you've got your axon terminals and your terminal buttons that will then release that neuron to a neighboring neuron to continue the communication. And this is happening at the most ridiculous speeds that I cannot comprehend, but it allows us to do the things that we do, emotionally, physically, etc. Okay? And when things break down, for example, we've got multiple sclerosis, which is a debilitating physical and mental disease because of the wearing away of the myelin sheath that protects the axon. And when that myelin sheath wears down, those neurons cannot transmit. And so things aren't happening that are supposed to be happening. I'm not going to talk about neurotransmitters. You guys can look up those specifically if you are given one. So I don't want to bore you with that right now. What I do want to do, though, is move on to our wonderful nervous system, okay? So we have our central nervous system. It's called the central nervous system because, boom, down the center, okay? It is our brain. It is our spinal cord. Booyah, okay? That's it. Then you've got the peripheral nervous system. It's going out to the peripherals of our bodies, all the way to the end of our fingers, all the way to the ends of our toes. You have the autonomic and the somatic nervous system. We're going to focus on the autonomic because that, of course, is going to bring us to the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, okay? Sympathetic nervous system is essentially our fight or flight response. You're being chased by a bear. Your body is sympathetic to the fact that you're in trouble and you need to get ready to fight or flight, right? Okay, heart rate, breathing increased dramatically. Of course, hunger, etc. is going to decrease because it wants you to be prepared to survive. Assuming the bear does not kill you, eventually you need to come down off that fight or flight response. And it's the parasympathetic nervous system, right? Parasympathetic nervous system, like a parachute, bringing you back down to normalcy, lowering your heart rate, lowering your breathing and your blood flow, ultimately reviving hunger, etc. Parts of the brain. Wow, the brain. Here we go, kids. what do I want to focus on with the brain? Let me look in the book to make sure I'm covering the things I want to cover. All right, so we've got our two brain hemispheres, okay? Down the middle, we have the corpus callosum. It's that little fiber connective tissue that allows the left and the right hemisphere to communicate with each other, all right? We have on the outside our lobes. Do you remember our lobes? We have our occipital lobes in the back, which of course is going to help us with sight. We have the parietal lobes on the sides, which basically do touch, pressure, bodily sensations. We have the temporal lobes, which is above the ears, go figure, because it helps with auditory hearing, of course. And then we have the frontal lobes in the front, which have to do with decision making, with planning, with organizing. It's what a lot of psychologists call the center of our personality, okay? Think Phineas Gage, okay? His frontal lobe being totally jacked up by that tamping iron, and it changed his ability to think. It changed his ability to plan. He couldn't think clearly. He was not Phineas Gage anymore, if you recall that video. All right, other parts of the brain to be familiar with. Amygdala. Okay, amygdala is going to be fear, anger, rage, etc. We've got hippocampus, which is all about the formation of memories. Is that about it for the brain? I think so. Oh, thalamus, sorry. Relays sensory information, and then of course the hypothalamus, which is going to be emotions. It's that want center, if you remember that video as well. All right, last thing I want to talk about on there is the question of nature versus nurture, okay? When it comes to looking at studies and trying to answer the question, what is more important? Nature, okay, what you're born with as far as your brain and your body, or nurture, the way you are raised is a big question in psychology. And you might see something like this on your test, so don't be shocked. That's why I want to cover it. There's three types of studies really quickly. There's family association studies, which are just looking at concordance rates. That's that fancy term for what we share as far as traits. So we're going to take a look at family studies to see what traits we share as both an immediate family, mom, dad, brother, sister, extended families, etc. So we can see disorders, history of health problems, whatever the case might be. So that's your most basic study that focuses on the nature element of things. We then have twin studies that also take a look at concordance rates to see how much both twins, whether they're identical, they are monozygotic, or if they are fraternal, they're dizygotic, to see what holds, or what traits they should share, I should say. The most famous one being out of the University of Minnesota, doing twin studies for a long time there to see how twins both share similarities and of course have unique differences as well. The strongest type of study, which ultimately is the hardest to do nowadays, is our adoptee studies. When you have children that for whatever reason are separated, where one might be raised by mom or dad, and they have that biology and nurturing, versus one that is reared in a different house, whether it be better or worse or indifferent, and we take a look at those kids and what concordance rates they have. So again, the idea being if my daughter who's filming this lives with us, how does she turn out compared to, let's say, my son who we gave up to adoption and is living the life of luxury with millionaire parents? What do they share? What do they share as far as, their biological traits, their personalities, success in school, success in sports, failures as well, of course. And what's different to see how strong biology is versus how strong the nurturing or growing up in those different situations would be. All right, sensation. Don't forget your parts of the eye, my friends. Okay, chefs in Paris love ratatouille. Of course, C is the cornea, it's the outer lane. That bell means it's time for a lunch, kids. Third period's over. Thanks for coming. All right. So cornea is that transparent outer part of the eye where light enters. Eye is our iris. It is the muscle that ultimately is going to control our P, our pupil, the size of the pupil, which the size of the pupil indicates how much light is going to be let in. When you're out in the sun, the pupil shrinks to help filter that light. It's so strong. When you're in the dark, that pupil opens up to try to take in as much light as humanly possible. The L, in this case, is the lens, and then the R is the retina being in the back of the eye, where your photoreceptors lie, where your fovea lies, that area of focus, where your blind spot lies as well. So that back of the eye, very important. And also, of course, your rods and your cones that help with color and night vision. All right. Speaking of color, yes, we need to talk about our two theories of color vision. We've got our trichromatic theory that says we have three primary colors that allow us in different spectrums of those colors to see every type of color possible. And then we have the opponent process theory, which takes a look at opposing pairs of color receptors and ultimately how they play off of that gives us the issues of after images. You remember that American flag? It's not red, white, and blue. It's yellow, black, and green. So check those out in case you don't remember. The ear, I'm hoping there's not a crazy specific thing about the ear. You might have to look something up. We talked about it in terms of the outer ear, right? The outer ear funnels the sound waves into our eardrum, and those sound waves turns into vibrations thanks to the eardrum. And then in the middle ear, those vibrations bounce off those smallest bones in the human body, the ossicles, aka the hammer, anvil, and stapes. And eventually into the inner ear, the most important structure there is the cochlea. And there have been past FRQs where you have seen parts of the ear in there. So don't be scared if the cochlea pops up or something even more random like semicircular canals. Look it up really quick, figure out what its specific job is so that you can apply it to the scenario. Olfaction, fancy word for smell. Just don't be confused if you see the term olfaction. Olfactory nerve, which is of course the nerve in the front part of your brain that helps you smell, and of course the olfactory bulb, which is kind of the area right behind your sinuses that allows you to smell the things that you smell. And if you're like me or most of you, you're not smelling a whole lot lately thanks to allergy season. You're welcome. Taste. Taste cells, taste buds. Keep that in mind. Skin is the largest organ in the human body. Okay, we have temperature, we have those issues that we can tell the difference, we have sensory adaptation. You know, when you get into that cold ocean or that cold pool and eventually you get used to it being cold, or that hot jacuzzi, you get used to it being hot. Keep in mind a few theories. We have the gate control theory of pain. Obviously it's a theory because we can't prove this, but we believe that there is the ability of our spine to block pain signals to our brain during certain instances. So you think about it in terms of like giving natural childbirth and how painful giving birth can be. Well, theoretically, the spine blocks those pain signals. We've got our kinesthetic sense. It's all about body movements. 20 minutes already? Oh my gosh, this is long. Thank you for letting me know, Brenna. Sorry, kids, it's going to be a long one. Kinesthetic sense versus your vestibular sense, which is kind of like X2 at Magic Mountain, throwing you off. You don't know where you are in space, your body's position in space. All right, this is 20 minutes. I'm going way too slow. Guys, perception, consciousness, sleeping, dreaming, it's probably not going to come up, but if it does, take a look. We have all those perception concepts. You did that art thing. The big thing being the issue of, well, let's go check it out really quickly. Sorry, kids. My brain is slowly dying. Brenna, do you remember the word for, oh, there it is, Gestalt. Sorry. It's hard to do this all on the same day at the same time without teaching you guys for a while. Gestalt means whole, right? We try to make wholes out of parts and pieces. That's all about perception. So if you get a perception concept, again, look it up in your book. You'll be good to go. 2 types of learning. Classical conditioning, okay? An unconditioned stimulus, as we know, elicits an unconditioned response. If we go back to Pavlov, unconditioned stimulus is the meat powder, the food. We don't have to teach the dog that when the food is presented, the unconditioned response of salivation occurs, okay? In Pavlovian example, we took a bell, it's a neutral stimulus. We rang it in front of the dog looked at us like, what? The dog wasn't scared, the dog didn't care. It's a neutral stimulus. We pair the neutral stimulus of the bell with the unconditioned stimulus of the food or the meat powder. We still get our unconditioned response of the bell. Of the salivation. Eventually, we pair this enough over time. We remove the unconditioned stimulus, the food or the meat powder. We have our bell. And our bell has become the conditioned stimulus because simply the ringing of the bell elicits the conditioned response of salivation. All right, there's lots of concepts within classical conditioning. Phobias, those of you who are scared of things, those are classically conditioned. Taste aversions, yes, Jack in the Box, tacos. You know my story. Those are classically conditioned. All these different concepts within classical conditioning. If they pop up, just keep in mind what role they play in here. Of course, John B. Watson, Baby Albert. The horrific story of that poor kid being conditioned to hate things cute, white, fuzzy. Don't forget that. Operant conditioning, much different, okay? Operant conditioning is all about learning through experiences. Operant conditioning is all about learning through trial and error. It's how we as human beings, for the most part, learn what we learn. Okay? You've got Edward Thorndike and the law of effect. If it pops up, not a huge deal. It's just the